He was not important to anyone on the ship. That was clear from the moment he stepped aboard. The vessel was long and curved like a silver blade, built by minds older than Earth's history. Alien pilots moved with smooth confidence, their four eyes scanning panels filled with glowing symbols. They spoke to each other in clipped sounds, sharp and fast, never looking back at the passengers. The human walked slowly, carrying a small bag with almost nothing inside. No weapons, no tools, just clothes, a bottle of water, and an old photo folded many times. His ticket was the cheapest kind, no room, no service, no name displayed, only a number. He took the last seat in the far back of the passenger bay. Around him sat many species, tall ones with glass-like skin, short ones wrapped in breathing masks. Some whispered, some slept, some stared at him with open curiosity. Humans were rare this far from Earth, not because they were special, but because they were weak. At least that was the common belief. The human kept his eyes down. He had learned long ago that staring back caused trouble. His hands rested on his knees, fingers slightly shaking as the engines began to hum. The sound was deep and heavy, like a giant heart waking up. Outside the window, space stretched endlessly. Stars burned cold and distant. He pressed his forehead gently against the glass and let out a slow breath. He was leaving everything behind. Earth was already far away in his mind. The blue sky, the rain that smelled like dust, the small house that no longer felt like home. He did not leave for adventure. He did not leave for glory. He left because staying hurt too much. No one asked him why. The ship lurched as it prepared for faster-than-light travel. Lights dimmed, then stabilized. A calm voice echoed through the bay in several languages, explaining safety rules no one truly listened to. The human listened. He always listened. The alien pilots trusted their machines completely. Their hands barely touched the controls. Most of the work was done by systems that corrected themselves. The ship had crossed thousands of star routes without failure. This journey was expected to be no different. To them, the human was just extra mass. The jump began. Space twisted outside the window, colors stretching like paint dragged across a canvas. Pressure pushed into the human's chest. He closed his eyes and counted his breaths. 1, 2, 3. His mother had taught him that trick when he was a child during storms that shook their house. When things feel out of control, she used to say, control what you can, your breath, your hands, your heart. The ship trembled slightly more than usual. One of the aliens clicked in mild annoyance and adjusted a setting. Another laughed softly, confident and relaxed. Nothing could go wrong, not on a ship like this. The human felt it before the alarms. A strange vibration passed through the floor, uneven and wrong. His eyes opened. His fingers tightened against his knees. His breathing slowed even more. Something was not right. A distant metallic groan echoed through the hull, quiet but full of pain, like steel being bent where it should never bend. The pilots did not react at first. The human lifted his head. His heart began to pound, not with fear but with recognition. He had heard sounds like that before. Old machines, old bridges, old things pushed too far. Around him, passengers shifted, uneasy but calm. No alarms yet, no flashing lights. Just that sound again, deeper this time. The human swallowed. He did not know what was coming. He did not know what he would have to do. But somewhere inside his chest, a quiet feeling settled. The same feeling he had felt during storms long ago. Something was about to break. The sound came again, louder than before. This time, it was followed by a violent shake that threw several passengers from their seats. A sharp alarm finally screamed through the ship, red lights flooding the bay like blood. Gravity flickered, heavy for 1 second, light the next, making bodies slam and float in confusion. The human grabbed the edge of his seat just in time. His shoulder burned as metal cut into his skin, but he stayed upright. Around him, panic exploded. Creatures cried out in voices high and low. Some clung to each other. Some froze where they were. The calm voice from earlier returned, but now it was broken and rushed. Words overlapped, Translations failed. The message ended suddenly. Up front, behind the sealed cockpit wall, the alien pilots were no longer relaxed. A warning symbol filled their main display. Then another. Then dozens more. Navigation data twisted into nonsense. The ship had struck something drifting between lanes, ancient wreckage, dense and spinning. Shields were damaged. One engine was bleeding power. "This should not be happening," one pilot said, mandibles tight. They tried to correct the course. The ship resisted. Another impact slammed into the side, tearing open a lower corridor. The hull screamed again, this time like it was tearing apart piece by piece. Emergency bulkheads dropped, sealing off sections without mercy. Some passengers were cut off mid-scream. The human felt the floor tilt under his feet. His seat broke free from its bolts and crashed into the wall. He was thrown forward, rolling hard across the deck until his back struck something solid. Pain burst through his ribs, sharp and deep. He gasped, struggling to breathe. For a moment, all he could hear was his own heartbeat. Then he pushed himself up. Not because he was fearless, but because lying still meant being crushed. Smoke curled through the bay. The air tasted bitter and hot. Lights above flickered wildly, some bursting with small explosions that rained sparks. A child-sized alien lay crying near a broken restraint, its breathing mask cracked and useless. The human stumbled toward it. Gravity failed again, lifting him slightly off the floor. He kicked against a seat frame, launching himself forward. He tore off his own jacket and pressed it over the cracked mask, sealing what little air he could. The alien stared at him, shocked, then clung to his arm. Another tremor struck. The ceiling above them split open, revealing a glimpse of raw space before emergency plating slammed shut. The sudden cold burned his skin. The child whimpered. "I've got you," the human whispered, though he wasn't sure anyone could understand him. He dragged the child toward a wall where the structure looked thicker. His arms shook. His injured ribs screamed with every breath. Still he moved. Across the bay, an alien attendant tried to activate a safety field. The panel sparked and died. The attendant stared at it in disbelief, then at the passengers, helpless. The ship lurched again, harder than before. This time, something inside the vessel failed completely. A deep, crushing sound rolled through the hull as the central spine cracked. Gravity locked at an angle, slamming everyone sideways. Screams filled the air. Luggage flew like weapons. The human lost his grip and slammed into the wall, his vision bursting with white stars. The child slipped from his arms. He forced himself up, dizzy and bleeding. He crawled on hands and knees, fingers slipping on the metal floor until he reached the small body. The child was alive, shaking badly. He pulled it close, shielding it with his own body as debris fell around them. Somewhere deeper in the ship, power surged wildly. In the cockpit, the pilots stared at the damage readouts in horror. Structural failure was spreading faster than automated systems could contain. The ship was folding inward, sections collapsing like broken bones. "We are losing the core," one pilot said quietly. That was when the cameras caught something unexpected. In a maintenance corridor near the engine ring, a human figure struggled to his feet, limping but moving forward, toward the most dangerous part of the ship. One pilot blinked slowly, confused. "He is not crew," they said. No one answered. The ship shook again, harder than ever. And the human, bleeding and exhausted, kept going anyway. The corridor ahead of him was no longer straight. Metal walls bent inward like ribs crushed by a giant hand. Panels hung loose, sparking and hissing. The floor vibrated constantly, a deep trembling that traveled up through his knees and into his chest. Every step felt uncertain, like the ship might tear itself apart at any second. The human leaned against the wall and breathed. His lungs burned, his vision blurred at the edges. Pain wrapped around his ribs and shoulder, sharp and unforgiving. Blood soaked into his torn sleeve, warm and sticky. His body wanted to stop. It wanted to lie down and wait for the end. But the ship groaned again. That sound pushed him forward. He remembered another sound like this long ago, a factory bridge collapsing back on Earth, sirens screaming, people frozen in fear. He had been younger then, smaller, scared out of his mind. But he had moved anyway, not because he was strong, because no one else had. He pushed away from the wall and limped onward. The lights died completely. Only red emergency strips remained, painting the corridor in shadows and warning colors. The air grew hotter with every step. The smell of burning metal filled his nose, thick and choking. Ahead, a maintenance hatch blinked weakly. The engine ring was close. He did not know how he knew that. He just felt it, like standing near a fire before you see the flames. Behind him, far away, passengers screamed. Bulkheads slammed shut. Systems failed one after another. The ship was losing its fight. In the cockpit, the pilots worked in silence now. Their voices had grown low, tight with fear. They had sealed off entire sections, sacrificing them to save the rest. Even so, the damage spread. Then one of them noticed the internal feed again. The human was still moving. "He will die," one pilot said flatly. "He should already be dead," another replied. They watched as the human reached the hatch and forced it open with shaking hands. Steam exploded outward, blasting his face with heat. He cried out once, a short broken sound, then disappeared inside. The feed flickered but stayed live. Inside the engine chamber, the noise was overwhelming. The core screamed like a living thing in pain. Energy arced wildly, blue and white lightning snapping across open conduits. Gravity twisted strangely here, pulling and pushing at the same time. Every surface vibrated with barely controlled power. The human dropped to one knee. For a moment he thought this was it, that he had come too far, that this place would finish what the ship had started. He pressed his forehead to the floor and laughed softly, breathless and weak. "Okay," he whispered to no one. "Okay." Then he stood up. He spotted the problem quickly, not because he understood alien engines, but because broken things always left signs. A main pressure conduit had split open, dumping unstable energy back into the system. The automated repair arms were frozen, confused by conflicting commands. The ship was choking on its own power. If the pressure kept building, the core would rupture. Everyone would die. The human dragged himself toward the conduit. Heat blistered his skin instantly. His hands shook so badly he nearly fell. He tore off his belt and wrapped it around his forearm, gritting his teeth as pain shot through him. He pulled. The conduit screamed louder. Energy surged, throwing him backward. He slammed into a support beam and slid down, gasping for air. His vision darkened. His body begged him to stop. He thought of the child he had left behind. He thought of the strangers screaming. He thought of a small blue world with rain and storms. Slowly, painfully, he stood again. This time he braced himself properly. He wedged his body between the conduit and the frame, using his weight, his bones, his whole fragile human body to force the split metal back into place. The pain was unbearable. His skin burned, muscles tore, his scream was lost in the roar of the engine. But the pressure dropped just a little. Enough for the core to stabilize. In the cockpit, warning lights shifted from red to orange. The pilots froze. "That reading is impossible," one whispered. The other stared at the screen, eyes wide. The ship was still breaking, but it was no longer dying. And in the heart of the fire, a human held the line, shaking, burning, refusing to let go. Time lost its meaning inside the engine chamber. There was only heat, noise, and pain. The human's arms trembled so badly he thought they might tear away from his body. His breath came in broken pulls, each one scraping his throat raw. Sweat and blood ran into his eyes, blurring the world into shaking light and shadow. The conduit fought him like a living thing. Energy pushed back, violent and endless, as if the ship itself was trying to rip free from his grip. His boots slid across the metal floor, soles melting slightly from the heat. He dug his heels in, teeth clenched so hard his jaw ached. "Stay," he whispered. "Not to the machine." To himself. In the cockpit, the pilots watched the readings climb and fall in unstable waves. The core was no longer rushing toward total failure, but it was far from safe. One mistake, 1 second of weakness, that would be enough to end everything. "He cannot maintain that position," one pilot said. Their voice shook despite years of training. "He should not be able to maintain it at all," the other answered. Neither of them looked away. Inside the chamber, alarms wailed in overlapping tones. Emergency vents blasted steam into the air, turning the space into a burning fog. The human coughed hard, nearly losing his balance. His knees buckled, but he forced them straight again. His thoughts drifted, slipping through cracks in his focus. He remembered being small, hiding under a table while thunder shook the house. He remembered holding his mother's hand at the hospital, feeling how weak her grip had become. He remembered promises he never got to keep. A sharp surge of energy slammed into the conduit, snapping him back to the present. Pain exploded through his arms. His vision went dark for a terrifying moment. He screamed, not in fear, in anger. He leaned forward, putting more of his weight into the brace. The metal burned deeper into his skin. The smell of scorched flesh filled the air. His body shook violently, every nerve firing at once. The pressure dropped again. Only a little, but enough. In the passenger bay, the ship's movement changed. The wild, uncontrolled shaking softened into something slower, heavier. Passengers noticed the difference immediately. Some stopped screaming. Others looked around in confusion, hope fighting with fear in their eyes. The child the human had helped earlier clutched a broken seat and stared at the ceiling, sensing something had changed, though they did not know why. In the cockpit, one pilot swallowed hard. "Stability is improving," they said, "but the damage it is spreading elsewhere." The ship had been saved from instant destruction, but now it was bleeding in 100 places. Life support was failing in sealed sections. Structural supports cracked under uneven gravity. The vessel needed controlled shutdown, or it would tear itself apart slowly. That meant time. Time they did not have. Inside the engine chamber, the human's strength began to fade. His arms felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. His hands slipped again and again, fingers numb and unresponsive. He could feel his heart racing wildly, each beat weaker than the last. He knew dimly that his body was reaching its limit. "I can't," he whispered. The words scared him more than the pain. The conduit shifted suddenly, grinding against the frame. The human nearly lost it. He slammed his shoulder against the metal, using the last of his strength to force it back into place. Something inside him tore. He cried out and collapsed to one knee, still holding on, breath coming in shallow gasps. Tears streamed down his face, evaporating in the heat before they could fall. He wanted to let go, just for a second, but he pictured the faces of strangers, the child, the silent pilots who had never even learned his name. He tightened his grip again. In the cockpit, a new alert flashed. "Manual override available." The pilots stared at it, stunned. The system had rewritten itself, creating a narrow window of control that had not existed before. The human's actions had forced the machine into a state where it could be guided again. They did not hesitate. Hands moved quickly over controls that had not been touched in generations. Power levels adjusted. Emergency fields activated. The ship groaned, protesting, but it obeyed. Inside the chamber, the conduit finally locked into place with a heavy metallic snap. The pressure dropped sharply. The engine's scream faded into a deep, exhausted hum. The human slumped forward, his arms slipping free at last. He collapsed onto the floor, shaking uncontrollably, his body covered in burns and blood. The ship was still damaged, but it was alive. And for the first time since the collapse began, silence spread through the stars around them. The silence felt unreal. After so much noise and violence, the quiet pressed heavily on the ship. Systems hummed softly, uneven but stable. Emergency lights glowed a steady amber instead of flashing red. The ship drifted now, wounded but no longer tearing itself apart. Inside the engine chamber, the human did not move. His chest rose and fell in short, uneven breaths. Steam curled around his body, clinging to burned skin and torn clothing. One arm lay twisted at an unnatural angle. His fingers were blistered raw, nails cracked and blackened. If he had let go even a moment earlier, none of this would exist. The internal cameras focused on him. In the cockpit, the alien pilot stood frozen, staring at the screen. Their species did not show emotion easily, but their silence spoke louder than words. What they had just witnessed went against everything they believed about life, logic, and survival. "He should not be alive," one pilot whispered. "He should not have tried," another replied. Yet there he was. A passenger. A species known for weakness. The reason the ship still existed. Slowly, the pilots began restoring communication to the rest of the vessel. Their voices echoed through broken corridors, guiding passengers toward safer sections. Rescue signals were sent, their strength boosted by the partially restored engines. Hope spread like a fragile flame. In the passenger bay, survivors clung to each other, exhausted and shaken. Some cried openly now, releasing fear they had held inside for too long. Others sat in stunned silence, staring at nothing. The small alien child sat quietly near a wall, holding a torn piece of cloth. The child did not know why, but they felt an ache in their chest they could not explain. Somewhere, someone was hurting because of them. Medical teams prepared emergency stretchers, their movements quick but careful. The pilots rerouted power to access the engine ring, something normally forbidden to non-machines. "This area is not designed for living beings," one pilot said quietly. "No," the other answered, "but a living being entered it." The hatch to the engine chamber opened slowly. Heat rushed out in a violent wave. Medics hesitated only a second before moving in. They found the human lying where he had fallen, eyes half open but unfocused, lips cracked and dry. One medic reached for him and pulled back in shock. "His skin temperature is still rising," they said. "How did he endure this?" No one had an answer. They worked fast, injecting stabilizers, cooling his burns, lifting him onto a stretcher with extreme care. When they moved him, his hand slipped slightly, fingers curling weakly, as if still trying to hold something invisible. The medic paused, feeling a strange tightness in their chest. In the cockpit, the pilots watched the feed as the human was carried away. One of them lowered their head, a rare gesture of respect in their culture. "We misjudged them," the pilot said. "Yes," the other replied softly, "we misjudged him." Data from the incident streamed across their screens. Damage reports, survival statistics, probability curves rewritten in real time. According to every calculation, the ship should have been lost. Except for one unpredictable factor. The human. As rescue vessels drew closer, the pilots prepared to transfer command. Protocol demanded a full report, species behavior analysis, updated threat and asset classifications. One pilot hesitated, then began typing something new. Under human capabilities, they added a line no one had ever written before. When all systems fail, they may become the system. In the medical bay, the human drifted in and out of darkness. Pain followed him like a shadow, but somewhere beneath it he felt warmth. Hands steadying him, voices speaking softly, though he could not understand the words. For the first time since boarding the ship, someone was looking at him. Not as cargo, not as a mistake, but as someone who mattered. And across the damaged vessel, aliens of many kinds felt it too. A quiet shared realization. The weakest passenger had carried them all through the fire. The medical bay floated in soft light. Machines surrounded the human, humming gently as they worked to keep him alive. Tubes ran from his arms and chest. Cooling fields shimmered above his burned skin, slowing the damage that should have already ended him. Every breath he took was shallow, uneven, as if his body was unsure it wanted to stay. The medics did not leave his side. They had treated many species before, tough ones, armored ones, creatures built for vacuum and fire. None of them had ever looked like this afterward and still breathed. "He is balanced on the edge," one medic said quietly. "If he falls, we cannot bring him back." In the cockpit, the pilots heard the report in silence. Rescue ships had arrived and locked formation around the damaged vessel. Tethers held the ship steady now, preventing further collapse. The worst was over, but the cost was still unfolding. One pilot replayed the footage again. Not the explosions. Not the damage. The moment the human leaned forward, knowing what would happen, and did it anyway. "He did not act from duty," the pilot said slowly. "He had no obligation." "No," the other agreed. "He acted from choice." That disturbed them more than fear. In the medical bay, the human's mind drifted. He dreamed of water. Not space, not fire. Water moving gently over his hands, a river back on Earth, cold and clear. He was younger there, standing barefoot on smooth stones. Someone was laughing nearby. He could not see their face, but the sound felt safe. The machines beeped faster. His heart faltered, then steadied again. Medics moved instantly, adjusting flows, injecting stabilizers. One of them pressed a hand against his chest, feeling the weak but stubborn rhythm beneath. "Stay," the medic whispered, though they did not know why they said it. Hours passed. The ship was evacuated section by section. Survivors were transferred to rescue vessels. Stories spread in fragments, confused and emotional. A human, a passenger, fire, impossible strength. Many did not believe it. Until they saw him. As the stretcher was carried through a corridor toward a larger medical ship, passengers fell silent. Aliens of many forms watched as the burned, broken human passed by. Some lowered their heads. Some touched the walls in respect. Some simply stared, shaken to their core. The small alien child stood among them. When the stretcher passed, the child stepped forward without thinking. Small fingers reached out and gently touched the edge of the fabric. "Thank you," the child said in a soft, broken voice. The human did not respond, but his fingers twitched. On the rescue ship, advanced medical systems took over. New machines scanned him, mapping damage and survival chances. The numbers were not good. One medic turned away, unable to hide their frustration. "He should not still be alive," they said again, this time with emotion. "Nothing like this should survive that." Another medic answered quietly, "Maybe survival is not only about design." The human's breathing slowed, then stopped. Alarms flared. Medics rushed in, hands moving fast, voices sharp and urgent. Energy surged through paddles pressed against his chest. Once, twice. Nothing. For a single, terrible moment, the room felt empty. Then his body jerked. A weak breath escaped his lungs, rough and painful but real. The machines steadied. One medic laughed shakily. Another wiped moisture from their eyes, pretending it was nothing. "He's still fighting," someone said. In the cockpit of the rescue vessel, the alien pilot received the update. They closed all four eyes for a long moment. "He refuses to leave," the pilot said. "Yes," the other replied, "even now." Far from the ships, far from the stars, the human drifted again in darkness. But this time he was not alone. He felt warmth around him. Not fire, not pain, something gentler. He heard a voice, not words, just a feeling. "You held on long enough." His chest rose again. Slowly, steadily. The universe, vast and uncaring, had tried to break him. It failed. And as the rescue fleet turned toward safe space, carrying the wounded ship and its survivors, one truth traveled with them, quiet but heavy. This human had not survived by accident. He had chosen to live. And by doing so, he had carried everyone else with him. The human woke to silence. Not the violent silence of space or the heavy quiet after disaster, but a gentle one. the kind filled with soft machine hums and distant movement. His eyes opened slowly. Light hurt at first. His body felt heavy, wrapped in pain and stiffness, as if he had been rebuilt from broken pieces. He breathed in. Air filled his lungs. That alone felt like a miracle. He did not remember the fire, not clearly, only flashes, heat, pressure, the feeling of holding something back with everything he had. He tried to move and failed. His arms refused to obey. Panic fluttered in his chest. A shape leaned into his vision. An alien medic, tall, calm, eyes filled with something unfamiliar. "You are safe," the medic said slowly, using careful translated words. "Do not move." The human swallowed, his throat burned. "The ship," he whispered. The medic paused. "The ship survived," they said, "because of you." The words did not make sense. He closed his eyes again, too tired to argue. Days passed. His body healed slowly, stubbornly, the way humans often did. Burns faded from raw red to deep scars. Bones knitted back together. Pain never fully left, but it softened, becoming something he could live with. And visitors came. At first just medics, then pilots, then others. They stood quietly at the edge of his room, unsure what to say. Some brought small tokens, data crystals, woven bands, symbols of respect from cultures that rarely gave it to outsiders. One pilot visited last. They stood stiffly, hands clasped behind their back. "You boarded as a passenger," the pilot said. "You left as something else." The human managed a weak smile. "I didn't plan to." "That," the pilot replied softly, "is what frightens us." News spread across systems. Not as a legend at first, as a report, dry, precise, then as debate, then as story. A human passenger entered an engine chamber. A human body stabilized a failing core. A human choice saved hundreds of non-human lives. Other species listened and struggled to understand. Humans were fragile, humans broke easily, that was known. But now, something else was known too. They endured. Months later, the human stood again. Walking hurt, breathing still pulled at old scars, but he stood on his own feet on a station that floated between stars. Ships passed outside the wide windows, their lights blinking like slow-moving constellations. The small alien child approached him. Older now, healthier. They held out a simple object, a small metal charm shaped like the damaged ship. "You dropped this," the child said. The human took it gently. "Thank you." The child studied him. "Are humans all like you?" He thought for a long moment. "No," he said honestly, "but enough of us are." The child nodded, satisfied. As the human prepared to leave the station, crews watched him go. Not openly, quietly, with changed eyes. Training manuals were rewritten. Ships were redesigned. Manual access returned where machines alone had once ruled. Emergency protocols included something new. Human adaptability. Human refusal. Far away, on routes yet untraveled, alien pilots told young recruits a simple warning and a strange kind of comfort. "If a human is aboard," they said, "the ship may survive things it should not." The human never became famous. He returned to small work, simple travel, quiet places. He did not seek attention. He carried his scars beneath plain clothes and his memories in silence. But the stars remembered. They remembered the moment a fragile being stood in fire and chose others over himself. They remembered that survival was not always about strength, armor, or perfect design. Sometimes, survival came from a shaking hand that refused to let go. And somewhere in the vast dark between galaxies, ships continued to fly. Not just powered by engines and calculations, but by the knowledge that even when everything collapses, a human might be there, holding the universe together for just a little longer.